Hey guys, let's look at one of the questions asked in the YouTube comments about how to make a checkpoint. So when the player gets destroyed, we want to spawn him back in his last checkpoint. Mm, Let's do this by taking a player. We can go to Playmate, search for the player, and we can play it. Let's zoom out. We'll first let's zoom out and set the player camera so that we have more viewing radius. Now what we want to do is we want a checkpoint and a hazardous object. Now a let's take a monster actually. Let's say let's say this is our monster. Now when the player comes in contact with this monster, the monster hits him and he kills the player. And after 5 seconds, we want him to spawn back in the last spawn point. First, we'll turn on the logic. We'll move all the unwanted and let's say the checkpoint is what can we make a checkpoint? Let's say a house is a check. Now let's call this is a checkpoint. So when the player comes in this radius, this is a checkpoint. For that, a let's take a hmm, what about a wire? There must be a dotted wire. This is one. I think there's a square rectangular one. I think it's called dotted. Can take. Let us double check the collision of it. So we click on view, go to physics for the selected object. You can see even though this is dotted, this whole thing is just a simple square. So anytime the player comes in contact inside this, we can know the player is inside this selected space. We can turn this off. Decrease it. And maybe we can change the color as well to make it much more better. I mean, it can be anything. Uh, it can be a simple cube as well. If you, and also let's always make this into a sensor because we don't want our player to trip on these small cubes. It should just walk. Now what I mean is I'll just let you know what the sensor does. Now if you see you can't walk through the house. If you make it as no physics, like if you don't want that to happen, you can always change it to no physics. But some nodes like collision detector node and collision detector node is very important because anytime we want the game to know that two objects are in contact or in collision, we want the physics to be in unmovable or dynamic. So we have to keep it in dynamic. Now the question can be if it's dynamic, I mean unmovable or dynamic, I can't go through it. So you always come to physics and turn on the sensor. Now you can go past it and still use a collision detector node. That's a small tip. We'll turn this on. Now before we do anything, always have a rule of thumb to make it a reusable. You can call it as the checkpoint. If you see there's already a duplicate here, it's not a part of the reusable. The reusable has a separate model. If you click on edit, you can see the separate reusable. So now let's click on this. Let's say you do not have this, you delete it. You can always click on the reusable here and click it in the space here and spawn new one. Now that's set. Now we want the enemy to, I mean, our scary looking enemy to attack the player when it is in front of it. Now again, rule of thumb, always make it into a reusable. You can call it enemy edit so that you have the reusable here, and you can move this down here. And here you can say collision detector. Again, only when it comes in contact, or maybe let's say in front of it. If you want it to be in front of it, you can add a, I mean, you can add any object. Let's say I add this cube. We drag and drop it here. And before we move forward, let's try and save it. Let's always try and save things. So YouTube checkpoint. Now we can keep it in front of this. I mean, again, there's multiple ways of doing it. This is one of the way that I would do. If you see the cube is also here, this is why you always make a reusable that you edit here, and if you have multiple enemies, it automatically applies for all the other enemies. Now you can attach to this because and change it to object because anytime the player moves, we want the cube to move, and if it rotates, we want this to rotate as well. Now we can say clear this, select the cube here, and we can say anytime the player comes in contact to this, which is basically in front of this, we want the enemy to attack. I can slightly move this ahead and reduce the thickness. And we can have a cool looking attack animation for our monster. Go to animation, type in attack. Let's make what is ninja hit. We can use this. Once you once you click on that animation, once you get this model, even though you delete it, you will still have that animation inside the project. So you can click on the enemy, come to advanced, click on character animation, go to animation, and you have ninja hit. So before that, let's make this idle. So on collision detection, so every object has a object group. That is how the game knows what object is it hitting. So when we click on the player, go to object, you see there's green and gray. Gray is common for almost all the objects. So green is kind of standard because red is mostly enemy and any other color is basically player. So green is the player here. make sure that no other object has green and it is very standard to the player. And can change the gray to green. So anytime the player comes in contact with this square, the collision detector knows yes, the contact has happened. Now, when that happens, we can say on collision start, drag and drop it to the enemy, character animation, go to animation and say ninja hit. And let's have an interval, execute it off, and say after on collision start, let's play the interval. And after that, on time, we can go to character animation. In animation, we can make a title because let's say we don't have this. You can see what happens. The enemy is still attacking it. And also the enemy must be much bigger. He's a huge, huge monster. Now you might be questioning yourself like, why is the why is the cube I mean the spear I mean the cube here, it's not looking good. Like you want to turn this off, but the functionality should be the same. You can just click on this square, go to visual and make it click on this to make it invisible and turn off shadow and in physics, convert it into a sensor. You see? And don't worry if the player moves, the cube will also move. That is why you need to parent the square to the enemy. Now, when we enable this back again, you can see after 1 second, it will go back to idle. Right? Now, when that happens, we want to kill the player. I would, for the tutorial sake, I'm making an instant kill. What you can do is maybe have a health bar, and when the enemy keeps attacking and when the enemy goes zero, you can destroy it. So for now, on collision detection, we want to destroy it. So take a destroy, and I think 1 second is too much because you can see there's two animation happening of the same attack. So we can reduce this to, let's see, 1.7. Yeah. So we can say on collision start, turn the timer on, and we'll first clear the destroy. Okay, on collision start, timer on. We want to destroy this. There's multiple ways of destroying the object. When destroying the player, you can use a broadcaster node, send a signal inside the player saying you can destroy. Okay, we can do that. That's much more simpler. So you can call in the broadcaster, and broadcaster is like a phone call. So the collision detector node is doing a phone call, and it's sending the information to, let's say, we can call the person as a player destroy. So on collision start, or maybe on interval end, because we don't want the player to instantly die. We want when the animation to go over, we want the kill to happen. So on time, we'll execute this. So interval node is calling to player destroy. It's making a phone call, and the person is. We can click on the player, go to controls, go to edit. Now this is the player control. I think the player control must have already had the destroy, so we can click on the player again. I think there's player health, edit this. So this already contains destroy. Let's see if it already contains destroy. Yep, you can already see it already has destroy. So we'll basically trigger this. If not, you can add it inside the player control or the player health. We just come to the node here and add the destroy node and set the target as this. We'll take in the broadcast listener. So the broadcaster is like the phone, an interval just made a phone call to player destroyer, and we'll change this to destroyer. So this is the receiver. This is like the person who received the call, and it's like, yes, okay, the player is dead, so we'll just kill it. So on signal received, we'll execute it. Let's see if this works. Yep, the player died. And when the player died, let's add a cool VFX to it. Go to effect, go to add. Let's see if we have any cool on death animation. I mean, sorry, on death VFX. Let's say we have a heart explosion. We'll add it inside this, drag and drop, add it here, execute it off, and let's execute this on. So on signal receive, we'll execute the particle on. Now what we want is, we want the checkpoint to, we want the player to go to the checkpoint, and the checkpoint should register that the checkpoint is working. And before that, we'll just save this again. Now let's work on the checkpoint. We can go back to the checkpoint here, the reusable, add in the collision node. I think it's pretty understood that we always use collision node whenever we want something to happen between, like when two things come in contact. We change it to green. Now we'll add a VFX for it. We'll use this one, drag and drop it inside here, execution off. Now why am I doing this is, if the execution is on, and if I play, you can see the particle is, I mean, the effect is playing when the game starts. So we'll execute that off, and on collision start, we'll execute it on. Yep. If you see on collision, we have that VFX. Now, if you see, I can do this n number of times. Now, let's say you don't want to do it n number of times. Click on the collision detector and disable after first. Now that will only happen once and it will not repeat it again. The collision detector is disabled right now after the first one. Now, what we want to do is when the player is dead, we want to wait for 5 seconds and we want to spawn him back. Now let's use a timeout for it. Add it inside a container. Take a take a UI text, I enable it off, and from the output, we can send it to value. Now we're using this because when I play it, you can see the timer playing. Now we don't want it to be playing as soon as we start the game. We want it to happen after the player is dead. And we know player is dead because the broadcaster is telling it to kill. So we can use a broadcaster listener here. And we can on signal receive, we can execute it on. Now when I player dies, this should start playing. Oh, sorry. This is a small mistake. I mean, we enable this on, but execution is off. You can see the timer is on. We can make sure time is enabled, but execution is off. And player destroy, execution is on. On player destroyed, execution is on. So I'll just revise what we have done. Like the most important thing here is on collision detection of the player, we're waiting for 0.7 seconds and we're making a phone call to player destroy. Player destroy signal is being received here and also being received here. And when it's received here, we are destroying and spawning a particle effect. And here we are using that signal to turn on the time. Hope this is very clear. Now what we can do is we want the timer to start, and after the time ends, we want the player to spawn back. Now what we can do is we basically want the information of this position so that we can spawn him back here. But before that, let's just spawn him in like here so that we know the spawning works. Then we can worry about how to spawn him here. Or I can already see why this won't work, but it's always a good thing that you know why things are not working. So I'll try and let you know why it didn't work and how we can fix it. So we want to use a spawner because we already know when we want to add something inside the game while the game is running, we always want to use a spawner node. Now we'll disable use spawner location and use spawn point rotation, and we'll enable absolute transform, and the values are set to 0, 0, 0, which is basically when we want to spawn something, it will spawn at 0, 0, 0 in the position. And when you click on this cube here, go to transform, you already know 0, 0, 0 is this position. I mean, you can basically move any object, you have this value, but we already know this cube, when we reset it, it's at 0, 0, 0. So this can be a reference point that the player should be spawning here. Now, can select this because this is what we want to spawn. And on time, we want on time end, we want to execute. Let's see if this works. If you see, even on 5 seconds, we didn't get a player to spawn. And the reason for that is when we destroy, we are basically destroying this object. Now, when we have already lost the information, there's no way that we can get back that information. So when we have destroyed this player, it, it doesn't make sense to bring him back to life because we do not have that information of the player because we have already destroyed it. So we need to keep the information of the player somewhere so that we can get back that information even though the player is dead. So that is why there's another, I mean, it's another rule that I follow, that I make anything and everything into a reusable so that I can always get that information. I mean, might not be get that information, but I like to do it because this is a single object and it does not have any reference. Like this enemy has a reference to this reusable, this checkpoint has a information of this reusable, but this player does not have a reference to any reusable. So when we destroy this, there is no information of it. So what we can do is clear this object, take our player, convert it into a reusable and call it player. When we click on edit, we have two copies. One copy is the reusable and another copy is the duplicate. Now when we play, we have our player. Now, and on the spawner, on object spawn, we'll select the player, which is basically this player. And this should work. He dies. 1, 2, 3, and boom, we have our player back. Now again, let's save it again. It's always good to save things. Now we want to spawn him in the spawn point. We don't want him to spawn him always on 0, 0, 0. So what we can do is we can come back to the checkpoint and take value inspector, add it to this checkpoint. I mean reusable. You can see the source is this checkpoint, and on start will disable it. And we can call broadcaster. We can say checkpoint location. Again, there are many ways to do it. You might go to HypeHype YouTube channel and they might have another way of doing it. When you're making a game, there's no one way answer. You can always find multiple answers, and everything should work. It's whatever you understand and whatever makes things easy for you. So we know value inspector is gonna give us the position of this checkpoint, which is basically the position vector, and on value output will execute. And if you click on this three dot, okay, here you're not getting it, but we already know that data is a position vector. It's a three vector. So we're sending this information here. And we can come back to this where the spawner is. We can add a vector, drag and drop, and we can call this checkpoint position. And take a broadcast listener, change it to checkpoint position. And from on signal received, we can go to vector, convert to line, and do not execute. And from the vector, we can output it to offset. Now let me just explain what's going to happen here. On checkpoint, what happens is, okay, we have missed one connection. So on collision detection, on collision start, we'll execute. Okay. So what's going to happen is when the player comes in contact, our collision detector detects it. It triggers the effect. It also triggers this node, which basically gets in the position data, like where is this checkpoint in the game, and send it to or make a call using this broadcaster to checkpoint location. And from the checkpoint location, we are storing that value inside this vector so that it can be used by the spawner. Spawner is the one that creates any object inside the game. So before this, it was spawning exactly in the center of the game, but now we are spawning it where the checkpoint is. Now let's test if this works. We come here, we do the checkpoint, everything works. We come here, oh no, our enemy kills us. We'll wait for the timer, and boom, the player is back here. Now let's say you want to add an effect. Hmm, where shall we add it? We need a more perfect. Let's see if we can use this. Drag and drop, execution off. I think I can't use the offset to offset it in the world. Let's see, where can I add that? This can be a little advanced, but let's see if I can explain it better. So we'll use the object storage. Object storage is a node where we store any object's data. You can see store object, and we can get back that data, like what object is it stored. Here we know when we spawn, we are spawning the player. So in the spawner, we have an option called on object created. And when you click on this three dot, you can see we can get the data of that object, and we can drag and drop it to store that object. So convert, do not execute. So now we have data of the object storage. Now what we can do is, it should work. I'm again, all these videos are not pre-thought. I'm just making this on the go. It's all real time. So sometimes things work, sometimes things might not work. But I'll always try and show a debugging way of how I do it, and you can try and implement something similar. So it can be also useful to know how do you debug stuff. So here there's a target. So we want the effect to happen where the player is. Now on output object storage, we can set the target. And we'll first execution turn off, and on object created, we're storing it, and then we'll execute it on. Let's see if this works. We die, we'll wait for 5 seconds. Hmm. Now why are we back here? What broke? Oh, okay, we didn't go to the checkpoint, my bad. So we go to the checkpoint, we die, boom, we are here. And the effect played, but the effect is a bit small. We can scale with the object. If not, we can manually scale it. So come here, checkpoint, check, we die. Boom, we are here. Um, let's save it. Let's think of what can we add. It's always let's try and add a music to it. I mean, this is pretty much the whole thing. What I'm gonna add later is just to have fun with HypeHype. Let's add some music. Music. Uh, let's say some horror music. What is this? I'm not sure if the audio is being captured, but music, move, scary, horror. What horror? Let's use this. We'll containerize it. So when we play, okay, we execute it on start. We have a music. So very intense, but I don't like it. Let's see. Yeah, maybe this execute it all. That's a good thing. Now on on the player kill, when kills us, we can add an attack animation. I mean attack sound. Go to music is for the music of the game, sound is for the sound effects. So that would be hit sound. Let's take this. Drag and drop it here. We can set the target. I think composition detect. Let's make this. I think we can also try and reduce this. This should be 0.5. Execute. See that. Um, we want this. Okay, on die also. Let's try and add a sound. We can add a game loose. No, actually, not game. I mean, we can still add this. Hmm, We can we can add it here or inside the player. Let's add it inside the player. So on destroy on Brock, let's listen up. Execute. So now for the checkpoint, we can use something. Let's see if anything maybe not magical. Let's say let's check. Something related to will. Yeah. Why not this? We'll add this inside the checkpoint. And collision detector will execute. Let's see if we have a heartbeat sound that we can play in the timer. I think we have. Just can use it here. We want to loop it for all the 5 seconds, so we click on loop. So this continuously plays. If you do not do this, it will stop as soon as it's complete. So we'll turn this on, and on destroy, we'll execute, and on time end, make sure to execute. Okay, we need to execute it off. We can enable it off. Sorry, so we'll enable it off, but on execute, we'll enable it on, and on time end, we'll enable it off. Will not go to execute because it's looping. There's an option to execute it off, so we'll do this. Let's see. Checkpoint kills, heartbeat sound, and we spawn. Okay, that's not stopping. Let's see if stop. Huh. This might be something that I will have to double check, but on loop might be just looping forever. I'll confirm it and make another video about it. But let's add some other music to it. What can we add? Let's say there's no music to it. I mean, I don't want to make the video too long. But on spawn, we can add a spawn sound. Let's see if there's any spawn sound list. I mean, why not this? Anyway, drag and drop here, and on object created, we'll execute. This should work. Yep. So hope this video was helpful. If you have any other doubts, drop. I would prefer if you drop a question in HypeHype Discord server. If not, you're not using Discord, you can always comment down in the YouTube. But I'll try to make a video. If you needed something really urgent, make sure to mention it, saying it's really urgent, and I'll try and make it as soon as possible. And let me know how do you think of the video. If you have any suggestions, or if you have any game in your mind, that is something that I can make and show it to you. And if you think that will really help, I'm willing to put that extra effort to helping you guys to get better at HypeHype. Um, keep using HypeHype, and I'll see you guys in the next video.